Hey guys, it's Miss Reyes. Today we are solving quadratics using square roots. So we have x squared equals 36. To undo a squared, we are going to take the square root because those are inverses of each other. So then you end up with x equals positive and negative 6. Number 2, x squared equals negative 81. So again, take the square roots. So you get x equals positive and negative. Now here, because we have a negative in the radicand, we're going to factor out an I. So that's positive and negative I, square root of 81. And the square root of 81 is 9. So the proper way to write it would be positive and negative 9i. X squared equals negative 48. Take the square root. So you get x equals, I see that I have a negative, so I'm going to write I, square root of 48. And then now I want to see what factors give me 48 so that I can simplify the radical. So let's see, 16 times 3 is 48. Radical 16 is the same thing as 4. So that equals positive and negative 4i radical 3. Okay. X squared equals negative 1. Take the square root. X equals positive and negative. And square root of negative 1 is just I. X squared equals 12. And remember, at any time you can pause it and try it yourself and then unpause it to see how I'm doing it. Take the square root of both sides. X equals positive and negative. The square root of 12 can factor into 4 times 3. So radical 4 is the same thing as 2. So x equals positive and negative 2 radical 3 is your answer. Okay, next example. X squared minus 39 equals 42. I'm going to first isolate the x squared by adding 39 to the right side. So that is x squared equals 81. And then I'm going to take the square root. So x equals positive and negative. Radical 81 is 9. Negative 3x squared equals 21. So isolate the squared. So divide by negative 3. X squared equals negative 7, and then I can take the radical. So x equals, I see a negative, so that's I radical 7. All right, x squared plus 32 equals 0, so move the 32 to the right side. X squared equals negative 32. Take the square root. X equals positive and negative I radical 32, but I'm not simplified just yet because radical 32 is the same thing as radical 16 and times radical 2, and radical 16 can be simplified to whole number 4. So that gives me x equals positive and negative 4 radical 2 as my final answer. Okay. So again, isolate the x squared, so I'm going to cancel. And now I'm going to divide by the coefficient. And you want to simplify negative 4 over 16, so that's negative 1 over 4. And then now take the radical. When you're taking the radical of a fraction, you are really taking the radical of the numerator separate from the radical of the denominator, like that. And radical 4 is the same thing as 2. So, and radical negative 1 is the same thing as I. So what I really have is x equals I over 2. And then positive and negative because I had taken the square root earlier over here. All right, negative 72x squared minus 36 equals 0. Add 36. Negative 72x squared equals 36. Divide by the coefficient. I have x squared equals negative 1/2. And take the square root. So x equals positive and negative. Split the radical. Positive and negative radical negative 1 over radical negative over radical 2. So this is really positive and negative I over radical 2, but that's not simplified yet. So let me rewrite it up here. I over radical 2. I have to rationalize the denominator, so I'm going to multiply by radical 2. So that gives me I radical 2 in the numerator, and radical 2 times radical 2 right here is radical 4, which is the same thing as whole number 2. So that would be my final answer. Okay, so if you think you've got it, you can pause and try this yourself and then unpause and double check, or you could just keep watching for more guidance. I'm going to add 98. Negative 49x squared equals 144, and then I'm going to divide by negative 49. Divide by negative 49. X squared equals, so 144 divided by negative 49. When you try to simplify that, you end up with the same thing. So it's just, I'm going to move my negative to the top though. Okay, and then now I can take the square root. So x equals positive and negative. Okay, so the numerator is the square root of negative 144. So that's really an I. Square root of 144 is really 12. So my numerator is really 12i. My denominator, square root of 49, is really 7. So what that gives me is 12i over 7. Positive and negative. All right, subtract 1. 81x squared equals negative 1. Divide by 81. X squared equals negative 1 over 81. Take the square root. The numerator is just I. The denominator is 9. And because I'm taking the square root, it's going to be positive and negative I over 9. Negative 80x squared minus 19 equals negative 4. Add 19. Negative 80x squared equals 15 divided by negative 80. X squared equals, when you divide 15 divided by negative 80 and you simplify it, that gives you negative 3 over 16. Now I'm going to take these square roots. The numerator, the radical has a negative, so I'm going to factor out the I, so that's I radical 3 for the numerator, and for my denominator, radical 16 is the same thing as 4, so x equals positive and negative I radical 3 over 4. Okay, this one's a little bit different, but it's the same idea. Okay, so we want to isolate the x squared, so we want to put all the x squareds on the same side. So 72 minus 81, that's going to give me negative 9. So negative 9x squared plus 18 equals, there's nothing on this side now, so I put 0. I'm going to pass the 18 to the other side. Negative 9x squared equals negative 18. Divide by negative 9. And I get x squared equals 2. And then now I am going to take the square root. So x equals positive and negative radical 2. All right, last one. Negative 62x squared plus 96 equals 85x squared. Okay, pass the x squared term to the left. So that gives me negative 147x squared plus 96 equals 0. Pass the 96 to the other side, so negative 147x squared equals negative 96 divided by negative 147 on both sides. So I get x squared equals, let's see, 96 and 147, and then simplify it. That gives me 32 over 49, and then take the square root. So now I have x equals radical 32 over, radical 49 is 7. This is not finished though, because radical 32 is really radical 16 times radical 2. And radical 16 is the same thing as whole number 4. So my final answer is x equals positive and negative 4 radical 2 over 7. And my correct answer is, oh, not D. Sorry. The correct answer is not D. Be careful. Correct answer is A.